Okay, so this demo is going to be a one-sided rivet. And when I say one-sided rivet, the last demo that I did was a rivet that went through two pieces of metal. So we had to hammer on both sides in order for the head of that rivet to peen over enough to capture the two pieces of metal. On this one, this is a single-sided rivet where I've taken this piece of wire, and this is 12 gauge brass wire, and I've soldered it to this piece of material. So on the back side, you can see there is no hole, there's no protrusion out there. It's just been soldered to this piece of metal. So what I can do is I can now drill a corresponding hole here in this piece and slip that over the top and then rivet just on one side, and that will capture this piece of metal. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a spacer to this. So I will get some dimension. So this is a sample piece here of a tube rivet. These are tube rivets instead of pin rivets, but the idea is exactly the same. We have a piece of tubing that sleeves over the rivet. And if your tolerances are correct when you're drilling your holes, that tube will prevent the two pieces of metal from closing down to one another. Okay, so that creates that space. It's a nice way to add some depth and dimension to a piece. So let me show you how that's done. So I've got my my single-sided rivet that's been soldered to the backer plate here. I have a piece of tubing, this little piece of silver tubing here, that is the appropriate inside diameter to sleeve over that pin. Okay. So there it is on the pin. And if I drill my hole correctly, there's a really nice tight tolerance in this hole here. When I push that down, that sleeve prevents these two pieces from coming in contact with one another. Okay. I just soldered this piece here. So this bottom backer plate is freshly annealed. Actually, everything is freshly annealed. So it's quite soft. But I also put a texture on this surface. And one of the reasons to think about putting a texture on a surface like this is because if you start riveting the head of that pin and you miss, you may unintentionally leave marks in that surface. And if you have a texture in there already, it's going to camouflage any misses. So it might be worth considering that. Let's look at this though. You can see, here's my assembly. I've got my spacer in there. The pin is far too long. Okay, so I need to remove some material here. And what I can do is I can just sandwich everything down, make sure they're nice and tight. Put this on my bench pin, and I'm just gonna eyeball this. I want about a millimeter and a half, just like the simple rivet, protruding out. And I think I'm just going to try to cut all the way through this. And most of the way through, I could probably just snap that off. Oh, I could have gone a little further. Might be easier if I grab my parallel pliers. Okay. Let me straighten things out again. Take my file. I'm going to knock that burr off the top of that rivet. Put everything back together, and then we will rivet that down. So there it is. You can see I've got a little bit hanging up there. That's my millimeter to a millimeter and a half. And we will take our ball peen hammer and we're just going to start to tap that head. that's been locked down pretty nicely. You can see my spacer in there, and it is nice and tight. So there is a rivet with a spacer, single-sided, so we don't have, you can see where it's been, striking the anvil, but we don't have a rivet head on this side. So easy way to create single-sided rivets.